Hey, I'm Adam Newport-Berra. I'm the cinematographer for the studio, and this is the Go Creative Show.
Hello and welcome to the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. My name is Ben Consoli, and today we have Adam Newport-Berra on the show talking about the show that everyone is talking about, The Studio on Apple TV+. Adam, welcome to the show.
Nice to meet you.
First of all, congratulations on such a successful show. Everyone was talking about it from episode one. It didn't even need the buildup. It's like one episode in, all I heard from my cinematography filmmaking peers is, you have to see the studio, you have to see the studio. I mean, what a huge success. How does it feel?
It feels really good. I think this is a really special project, and every once in a while I come across something where I read the script and I just instantly know it's going to be great. It doesn't always happen. A lot of times I'll read something and need to get to know the director, need to know who's part of it to really understand it fully. But the second I read the material, I was just over the moon excited about it. And we worked really hard to pull it off. And, you know, when I started talking to my crew and talking to all the heads of departments, I made it very clear that I wanted to do something really strong and really different and, very decisive with it. And I think we really pulled it off. So I'm proud of our team.
What was it in the script that made you say, like, this is it? I want it. I need it. This is mine. I don't need to overthink it. I want this project.
It's funny because I don't actually normally respond to material about our industry. I find it to be kind of narcissistic and a little too specific and a little too niche. And I really like making things that anyone I know, my neighbors or friends, can go out and see and be excited about. And I often find that stuff about our industry can be alienating, but there was something very human and very funny and very self-deprecating that just felt right about this show. And it felt like a really fun way to acknowledge how ridiculous our job is. And I think that's something I don't live in Los Angeles or New York. I live in Oregon. Most of my friends are not in the film industry. And I constantly tell them stories about how insane our job is and how ridiculous and silly my interactions on set are. And so it's fun to be able to create this and show people the truth.
I love that. I was kind of the same way when I saw the previews of it. You know, it looked great. Seth Rogen, I'm like, it's going to be great. But at the same time, I was kind of like, I'm the same as you. I'm like sort of turned off by the idea of like projects about the filmmaking industry. But like I said, first episode across the board, everyone is like, this thing is amazing. And I think what makes it work is that the humor's there, the writing's there, but there's a truth there that's universal. I think there's a truth that's universal that goes beyond the filmmaking industry. Anybody at any job that has to pull together a project at the last minute is going to have these moments. And there was something about it that was very, very relatable, even though it was all about filmmaking, obviously.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, I think to me, like, the jokes were funny. The world was really exciting. I could tell that they wanted to do a lot with world building. And I think for me, I'm always fascinated by the intersection of art and commerce. And I think that's, something that is very relatable to a lot of my friends who are creatives in any field, that we're all trying to make our mark. We're all trying to do something special in this world and leave our mark on culture. But in order to do so, most of the time we have to interact with money, and we have to interact with people who have the money that enable us to do what we want to do. So I think it's relatable.
Talk to me about the prep for the studio. So you've read the script, you decided that for sure you want to be involved in this. How did preparations begin, and what's your process for it?
Every process is different. I think, I have things I like to do in prep, but the more I do this, the more I've learned that every director is different and their process is different. I really have to tailor it to how they think and how they work. And so for this, from the start, we decided every scene was going to be one shot. So there was no shot listing to be done. There was only planning to be done. So we really just talked through the script and came up with locations, and a lot of it was just finding locations. And then designing the sets and figuring out how we could find locations that were really dynamic and complex and helped us create these sophisticated camera moves. and then also how to build a set that would be fun to shoot in, and we could constantly, find new ways to shoot. So a lot of the prep was just talking through locations and figuring out how we could pull things off and talking about how we could stitch scenes together. A lot of what we talked about was transitions. How do we get from one place to the next seamlessly, whether it's through a stitch or knowing we would cut, if we knew we were going to cut, trying to figure out a way to make that cut feel intentional and decisive and not just like a blip in the action.
With every project like this, I think for anyone, especially when you're making a film or commercial, it's like you're like, we're definitely going to be able to do this. But there's a little part of you that says like, I don't totally know how yet, but I know it will happen. And I'm curious if you had those moments with this, and if so, when did it click? When you were like, okay, wait, we've got this. This is going to work.
To be completely honest, we didn't know if it was going to work. Like, we were fully aware that we could show up on day one and just completely fail. And we talked about it a lot. We joked about it a lot. And we would talk through things, and then Seth and I would be like, well, hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully we can pull it off. And a lot of my job in prep was to try to talk to my crew and figure out how we could pull things off. We tested a lot of rigs. We tested a lot of ways to move the camera to support the camera. But, we did a little, the testing was helpful, but you never really know until you get all these actors in a room and you're in the space. So we really didn't know if it was going to work until about halfway through the first day of shooting. And on day one, we were shooting on stage. We spent a good 6 hours rehearsing, and by lunchtime we hadn't rolled the camera, and the producers were completely freaking out. I wasn't freaking out. Seth and Evan weren't freaking out, but the actors were kind of confused. Everyone was a little unsure. But by lunch, we had completely rehearsed the scene and figured out the camera move, and we started rolling after lunch, and I think after a couple hours, we had finished our day, and we had somehow shot an 8-hour day instead of a 12-hour day. And so it went from like sheer panic and fear to elation. And I think from there, we just hit the ground running, and we knew we could pull it off, and we just kept, hammering it out.
Was there ever a point in production where everyone was just like, this is just too hard? Like, I don't think I think we need to redo this. It's just too much.
No, I think I was really impressed. I think Seth and Evan were really clear about their goals for the show and why they were doing what they were doing. And that really rubbed off on me. So I was able to project it to my crew, and we hit some days where, we were doing 25 takes of a shot, and it's a 5-minute shot, and it's exhausting, and it takes all day, and the actors are tired. And, we'd cut, and they'd be like, why'd we cut? We don't know what's going on. Or someone would blow a line. And, there were a lot of times where an actor would miss their line or miss their beat and be totally crushed by it and feel like they couldn't pull it off. And then we would, everyone supported each other and just kept plugging away at it. And there was, we never put anyone on blast for messing up a take, because everyone knew that they could be the one to mess up a take. So it was a really supportive set, which I think made all the difference. And if something went wrong, we would oftentimes know exactly what went wrong, and no one would have to say anything. Or if it wasn't clear, we would talk about it, but then we would just go right back to one and roll again. And, we would try to be as generous with everyone as possible. And given that we didn't have to shoot a lot of coverage, that left us time to do things right. And, we were also smart about finding stitch points where we could say, okay, we've gotten through 3 minutes of this scene. There's a pan that we know we could stitch 2 takes together. So we would have like little key points along the scene where, if we got to a certain point and we hadn't messed up, we're like, okay, we can pick it up from there next time if we feel too exhausted to take the whole thing through. So we were also judicious about how many times we made everyone do the entire scene. So we could maintain the best energy. I
imagine one of the more difficult ones was episode 2, I think, right? That's the oner within the oner.
Yep.
Watching it seems like it would be the most challenging, just because you're trying to replicate a sunset scene, which is like the most difficult thing in the first place. And it seems like for that episode, you guys just piled on, what's the most challenging thing we can do? And let's make it even more complicated. So yeah. I'd love to hear kind of the way that you approached that episode in particular, and, some of the challenges that you faced.
It was difficult for a reason, but then it was made more difficult by every choice we made.
So my instincts were right.
Yes. And I think, I wasn't, it's funny because we really were ambitious with the locations we tried to shoot in. I think every location is spectacular in the show, and that was really intentional. And the house that we found for this episode for the Oner is this incredible house called the Silvertop House, designed by John Lautner, and it's perched on a ridge above Silver Lake, and it's really an amazing location to shoot in. It's a dream to shoot in, but it's 360-degree windows. It's on a hill. There's no flat space around it. There's nowhere to stage crew or gear or anything. You're kind of completely exposed to whatever the sun is doing that day. There's no way to bring cranes in to light or to block sun. So we were really just at the whim of what was happening each day. We shot for 4 days. And it's, it's a location that we didn't have super easy access to. It's an expensive location. It's a historical location. We couldn't touch a lot of things. We couldn't go on the roof. We couldn't mount things. We couldn't drill into anything, so we really had to shoot it pretty raw. So the only way to figure it out was to basically understand that we could only shoot in the evening. We could only shoot at magic hour. A lot of times when I'm trying to shoot something at magic hour, I can fake it with blocking light or bringing light in with cranes like I was talking about. We couldn't do that. And so knowing we had 4 days, we didn't even have all the actors all the days. So we had to piecemeal it together in some way. We kind of just broke it up into 4 sections. And we started at the beginning and we just take it as far as we could each day. And so we basically just started from the driving and went for it. And every day we would rehearse. You start at breakfast, we would rehearse all day. And then, as we neared sunset, we'd start rolling. And then we would just get as deep into it as we could and then find the pickup point the next day.
So even without the entire cast of actors, you would still just start from the beginning every day?
We didn't start from the beginning every day, no. So for the first day, we knew we were going to do the driving.
Okay.
So we did all the driving work, because the driving work is really sophisticated and complicated. And honestly, for all of the most annoying reasons, it was a lot of dealing with, RF signals and antennas for camera control and for transmitting video. So we had to have really complex video village set up with antennas everywhere, and follow cars and chase cars, things like that. So a lot of it was just figuring out the rigmarole of that. And on the day we were supposed to shoot, of course, everything went down, because as soon as, we'd set everything up and then some other wireless got turned on and it ruined everything we set up. So we had to scramble to fix that. So the first day we got through the driving, and then we got into the house, and we think we got, a chunk of the interior done. And then the next day we picked it up from there. And then, that day we got halfway through the interior, and then the third day we picked it up, and we were able to schedule it so that, when the actors were available, we were kind of smart about using them. And then when they weren't available, we just made sure they weren't part of the episode. And we just had to kind of slug through it. But the most important thing that we did was we just spent as much time as we could there before the shoot. During pre-pro, we would, Seth and Evan and I would go there with the other writers, and sometimes I'd bring the operator or some of the other key department heads, and we would just have the sides in hand, and we would just walk through the house and talk through the script. And often I would just film it on my iPhone or an iPad, and we would just slog through it and just be like, what is the most interesting way to shoot this? What is the most dynamic way to shoot this? How can we make this crazier? For us, it was all about how do we make this more complicated and crazy. I think a lot of times when people are thrown challenging situations, it's all about how can I make this easier on myself. But I knew that this show thrived on maximalism. It thrived on sort of the absurdity of what we were trying to do. So I think everyone knew that, and we always just tried to push it and tried to figure out how we could make each choice even crazier than the last.
I love hearing that, because we've had a lot of people on that have done, Oner scenes. They've talked about it. And I usually get into a discussion about compromises that need to be made in order to have a successful Oner. And people talk about lighting compromises and, maybe some stylistic choices they may have otherwise done. But I love that you are talking about adding more to it, making it more difficult, challenging yourself even more. It seems like this was overall a really no compromise type of production, despite the fact that you're doing these in Oners.
I've done a lot of Oners in my career, and I've always found that it can become a crutch and it can become an excuse to not do things that we want to do, because we're like, oh, we're doing a Oner, so we should probably not do that, or we shouldn't try that. Like, let's play it safe. And I think what we realize very quickly is this show will only work if we're, pedal to the metal at all times. And I had an amazing crew who was cool to roll with that. And I would often throw out ideas for shots or scenes that I had no idea how to pull off, and my crew would just be standing behind me, and I'd hear them on, we'd be on headset, and they would, as I'm saying the idea, that I'd hear these like big sighs or just like them sucking in their breath, and then Seth and Evan would be like, yeah, let's do that, and then I would look at my crew, we'd all be staring at each other like deer in headlights, and then we would just get to work, and we would start plugging through it, and there was always someone who had a good idea. It definitely wasn't always me. A lot of times it was my key grip, Adam. A lot of times it was our operator, Mark, or our other camera operator, Jesse Kane, or our ACs. Like, everyone knew what we were trying to do from an aesthetic standpoint, which is really amazing. It's really cool to have such a specific approach, because everybody on set understands it. The PAs understand it. The boom operator understands it. Like, everyone knows what we're doing, and so everyone can have an idea. And Seth and Evan create this really cool dynamic on set where it feels really like safe to throw out ideas. It wasn't like everyone's shouting around all the time, but everyone found ways to kind of inject some thoughtful idea. And a lot of times it came out of standing in the right place in the room at the right time. Sometimes my second AC would be jammed into a corner, and he'd be like, hey, Adam, you should come take a look over here because it looks amazing. And I'd walk over there like, oh yeah, great, let's try that. And then Mark, the camera operator, would fold that into a shot. So it was really cool to have such a cohesive vision that the whole team could kind of play with.
You mentioned a couple minutes ago about how sometimes you guys would use Oners as a crutch. I'm curious, what are the types of things that you are like, oh, we don't have to do it because we're doing a Oner? What are some of the things that kind of get pushed to the side when you do a Oner that didn't necessarily happen this time?
I think sometimes performance can get diluted, blocking can get diluted. A lot of times we'll be like, the camera can't do that. Camera can't go through a window, so we're not gonna see out the window when the car pulls up. Or there's stuff happening downstairs, but we can't throw the camera downstairs, so we're just gonna have to wait till they walk upstairs to get that moment. And we really never wanted to feel like we couldn't do anything. So for us, it was, we need to see outside. Cool. We're going to figure out a way to stitch the camera into a techno crane shot that goes out a window, goes outside, has a scene outside, and then stitches back in. We're going to figure out a way to go from an office upstairs, shoot over the balcony, drop down, see somebody, and be able to go back upstairs. And also just like coverage, I think sometimes people don't give actors enough shine in a Oner. Like, a lot of stuff will happen off camera or over someone's shoulder. And we were really we were kind of nervous about doing all the panning back and forth. And I think for some people just didn't like it. And sometimes I was frustrated by it, but we did a lot of just panning back and forth between actors as they were talking. And it's because we wanted to get all their performance, and we really wanted to let them, shine and be on camera. So we really leaned into it and just said, we're going to cover the shit out of this, and we're going to get every moment of every scene. We're not going to let anything go unearthed or untouched. And I think a lot of times with Oners, you let people go out of frame, or you let things be said off camera, and we really just committed ourselves to capturing as much as we could in front of the lens.
Plus, it made it so frantic, which was that's the show. It's supposed to be frantic and crazy.
Exactly. I don't think that would always work. I think there are a lot of shows or films where that would have been a disservice to the energy of the scene. But the fact that we were always ramping up the energy and there was a sense of panic and anxiety, we could lean into the whip pans, and it totally made sense and it totally worked.
What were you guys shooting on?
We used the Arri Alexa 35, which I really like. It's small, it's lightweight, has amazing latitude. It sees into shadows really well. It handles highlights really well. It loves natural light. It's really nice on skin tones. It's just a really versatile camera, and it fit a lot of our rigs quite well. And it's also just a great camera to be handheld. And we shot everything on one lens, on a 21 millimeter Zeiss Master Prime, which is a lens that I really, really love. And I can't remember, I was talking to Seth the other day, and we can't remember whose idea it was to shoot the entire show on one lens, but we felt like it was the right way to go because it just sets a certain voice. And it also just eliminates another decision we had to make on set. You know, it's nice to know exactly what lens is always going to go on. We know exactly what we're seeing whenever we know. Like, whenever I see a camera in a room, I know exactly how much it's seeing. And I know on a 21 millimeter, I can get a great close-up that feels very intimate and visceral. And I can also very quickly get a wide shot if I pan off that close-up. So it was just a really versatile combo.
It's such a great choice. Like, I mean, you could tell it's somewhere in that low 20s. I was thinking it was sort of like 24-ish, maybe 25 at times, but those intimate close-ups are so cool because it's one shot. You need to do justice to every actor that's there. The quick pans, like, it's just great. But now it means that you see a lot of your sets. I mean, you're seeing everything. So I kind of want to transition our conversation to maybe like lighting and your approach to it to make sure that everywhere you looks good.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the biggest challenges of the show, was just lighting it. That's another thing where I think Oners often make huge compromises and sacrifices, is with lighting. You know, you end up with a lot of like really flat lighting that allows you to see everything, but doesn't have like the impressionistic feel of something that we want to look at. So our solution was often just finding great locations. I think locations go really far. You know, we had really stunning backdrops for all of our scenes, and that was something I really pushed for. You know, I told them, I was like, I'm not going to be able to make every single location, I'm not going to be able to make any location look amazing if we're shooting in 360 quickly. So we really need to be judicious about how we choose these. And Julie Berghoff, the production designer, got that, and they went with this really cool, just overall aesthetic of, you know, the Frank Lloyd Wright, that era of architecture, the John Lautner houses, that has a lot of texture, a lot of wood, a lot of glass, that often also has a lot of skylights and a lot of really beautiful ambient lighting, and a lot of dark walls. And the dark walls create this negative fill that's really nice. And then you have this beautiful top lighting. So we were able to often work in locations with a lot of natural light, and then most of the time we were either diffusing things off camera handheld, or we were just creating negative fill by walking in flags, and we didn't have to do a lot of lighting. You know, I really didn't want to be tedious with the lighting. The show is so driven by the performance and by the camera movement that I didn't want to sit there like twiddling our fingers and, you know, playing with dials. Like, I don't love that. I find that really boring, and I think it kills the momentum. And I didn't want, you know, there was a point where I was like, oh, okay, I'll do a bunch of LED lighting. I'll put LED lights everywhere, and I can program them to change at certain levels and times. And, you know, when an actor moves there, I can bring up that key light. And very quickly realized that it was just like, it kind of killed the vibe. And it was just like, I was so focused on, because I'm just like, I think that there was something really fast and loose about this show, and wild and chaotic and spontaneous, that I didn't want to overwork things. You know, I think we were really specific about camera placement and composition and camera movement, but always to a degree. I always wanted to figure out everything to like 95%, because I knew that there was always going to be some camera bump or some improv moment that just like made the scene that much more magical. Like, for example, there's a scene at the beginning of episode 1, or not the beginning, it's later in episode 1, it's near the end, where Seth's character Matt has just gotten off his meeting with Scorsese, and he's running up the stairs in the office, and he trips, and like, that was not planned, but it's like maybe my favorite moment of the episode, because he's like basically telling everyone to fuck off, and then he trips. And I think
totally
that, like,
remember that moment.
Yeah. And it's just stuff like that if you're too precious, it's like you kill a lot of those moments, you know. And there are camera operators that would be rolling on something like that and see Seth trip and just cut and immediately go back to 1. But like, my camera operators just know that like we're always going, whatever happens, happens. And I really just wanted to honor the performances, because I think I've learned in my career I can work as hard as I can and do the best work possible, but if the final product is not good, and if the performances aren't great, it doesn't matter. No one's going to like it. So for me, it was really about being performance forward, and I really wanted to focus more on the camera and the camera movement, and make sure the lighting worked rather than like overwork the lighting or overwork anything in particular.
We got a question about lighting, your lighting technique from Sachin Padmahaban on Instagram. Did you use any specific lighting techniques or rigs that were unique to this project?
Lighting wise, like on the stage, we used a lot of LED lighting, a lot of like sky panels because they were cheap, a lot of tungsten lights because they were cheap. I tried when I could to use mole beams, which are older lights that create a really beautiful shaft of light, which are becoming more and more difficult to find. But because we were shooting in LA, I tried to get them, and we were able to get them, and I use them in the office a lot to create nice shafts of light. Other than that, the thing that was really specific to this project was so much stuff was handheld. And a lot of it wasn't lighting per se, it was more grip, but it was a lot of like running around with diffusion, running around with flags for negative fill, and just creating contrast ratios on people's faces off camera with grips running around with flags. And by the end of the show, my grip team was so dialed in that they were doing it without me asking at all. You know, I watched BTS of some of these shots, and I'm so in it. You know, I'm watching the monitor, I'm talking to my guys on comm, and I'm watching this BTS, and I'm like, holy shit, there are 5 grips running around with diffusion and flags that, like, I wasn't even fully aware of on set, you know? And that's a huge testament to my crew understanding what we're doing and just bringing their A game every day. But a lot of it was really simple. And I think that, like, it just goes back to the fact that, like, location and material is so important. And for me, composition and camera movement is king. And, you know, lighting is in service of, you know, making sure things show up. I mean, I will say, like, on the Noir episode, I'm not sure which episode that was. I think it was episode 4, maybe, the one with Olivia Wilde. We tried to go much more impressionistic with the lighting. But again, we weren't using anything particularly special. What was special about that was that I was because we were shooting a movie within a movie within our show, I was able to leave a lot of lights in shot, which was honestly like a lifesaver for me. I was able to, like, there's that whole Chinatown set, and I was able to have cranes in the shot. I was able to have lights on stands. It was basically just like wherever I needed light, I was like, cool, put a light there because I can sell it, you know, creatively that it was part of the movie set.
I think that was like the missing reel or something like that. Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah, that's a cool episode. Well, I think what you know, that episode in particular, but I think the whole show, you developed a really interesting look with this show because there are certainly nods to classic, you know, cinema and classic Hollywood, but even in and of itself, it has such an interesting look and feel to it that's a little bit vintage, a little bit modern. It's sort of everything all in one. Warm. It makes you feel like Los Angeles. Like, there's a lot about it that has kind of that Hollywood feel. So I'd like to talk to you about just kind of the way that you developed the overall look, your inspirations for it, and how it came to what it became.
Yeah, I think a lot of that sort of old school Hollywood charm can be attributed to what Seth and Evan had wanted from the beginning. And then Julie Berghoff's ability to pull that off. Like, I think this show worked so well because of what was put in front of the camera. You know, I think we did a lot to make the camera work special, but it wouldn't have been as special if it weren't for, like, the amazing wardrobe decisions that were made and the amazing design decisions. So first off, it was just building amazing sets, getting great locations, having good wardrobe, good hair. And then from there, I think a lot of it was intuitive. Like, we were shooting in LA, we were shooting these amazing locations. What are the best ways to see these places? Like, the LUT we built, you know, we built a LUT ahead of the shoot with our colorist, Damian Vanderkruysen, who I work with on almost every project. And we gave him a lot of references. I can't honestly remember exactly what they were, but I knew I wanted something classic and very filmic that had kind of a slightly printier look with softer, kind of lifted blacks and warmer skin tones. So he did a great job of building that. And then from there, again, it was just about leading into all these locations and these, like, really rich, warm tones, which, you know, a lot of them had a lot of wood, a lot of brick, a lot of green, a lot of gold. And I think that just comes through. You know, it's really, like, for me, it was a delight to be able to shoot all these places and all these people. And it kind of, like, you're shooting in LA, the weather's great, the sun's beautiful. It kind of just just kind of worked out. You know what I mean? Like, it's a little bit of just the magic of being there. And then, I'd like to say a lot of it was, time of day that we shot, our camera position in relation to the light. For me, it was just finding the nuance of how to keep it magical,
There are so many cameos in this. I mean, just so many huge celebrities jumping on the show. It's out of control. I mean, I'm looking at the list now. Martin Scorsese, obviously. Zoe Kravitz is there. Ron Howard, Dave Franco, Ice Cube. It goes on and on and on. Did you get nervous a little bit? Like, who is the celebrity that you were the most nervous to film?
Oh, Scorsese, for sure. And of course, he was the sweetest human in the world and just excited to be there. And it was he was just like a little camera nerd, a film school nerd when he was there. He was just telling stories and asking us questions. It was so special. But before then, there was he wasn't locked in until a week or two before we started shooting. And Seth, as soon as he was confirmed, I could see Seth's demeanor change from lighthearted, stoned Seth to very serious. I can't fuck up. I need to make this work. And just every day, we'd be shooting stuff that had nothing to do with his episode, Scorsese, a week in advance. And there would be days where I'd just look over at him and he would just be staring off into the void. I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm just really nervous to shoot Scorsese. And we would talk about it. And the plan we devised was, okay, he was really worried that Scorsese was going to be offended that we only had one camera and think that we were idiots and didn't know how to shoot coverage. So Seth actually asked us to bring a second camera to set that day in case Scorsese asked, where's the second camera? And also it's tough because Scorsese didn't know our approach. We didn't really give him the full brief of the fact that we were doing Oners. So he didn't show up off book. And he didn't know that we were doing Oners. He didn't know we were doing one camera. So we kind of sprang all of it on him last minute. And fortunately, we had ways to help him remember his lines on set. And he's also just really sharp and just got it immediately and was nailing it. But it was nerve-wracking. And I think we didn't know if it was going to work until we really got into it with him and he started to pick up on what we were.
Oh man, that must have been so. Just watching him walk on set it'll give you chills. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Special, and he's just a great person and a filmmaker and an artist. And as soon as I realized that that's who he is at his core, everything went really well. I think that he doesn't bring ego. He was just really excited to see how we were doing things and to be a part of it. And I think one thing you'll notice, it's actually quite funny, for how many cameos we have in the show, there were just as many, if not more people who turned us down and who didn't want to be a part of it. A lot of it is availability, obviously. And then a lot of people just didn't get it. And what you'll notice is in this first season, a lot of the cameos are directors. And I think that's because a lot of these directors understood what we were doing, even actors turned directors like Zoe Kravitz, I shot her last movie. She's a director, also an amazing actor. Same with Olivia Wilde, who actually just shot her latest movie. But it's funny to see that directors are excited to do this because they know how absurd our job is and how ridiculous it is. And they like to poke fun at it. And I think a lot of actors were a little nervous to be a part of it. And I know for a fact now actors are flocking to Seth and Evan begging.
I can imagine.
We're not into it now being oh, okay, I think I could get behind this.
Yeah, you're going to have no problem getting people on season 2. That's for sure.
Yeah, totally.
I want to talk to you for a few minutes about the final 2 episodes of the season, CinemaCon in Las Vegas. I mean, it looks like you had a live casino there. I don't know if you blocked the whole thing off or what, but it looks pretty live to me. Not to mention the ridiculous insanity in the party scenes and just the chaos of the whole episode. Those 2 must have been so challenging for you with just the sheer scope of the whole thing.
We shot Vegas at the end of the production. We were there for 2 weeks, and Vegas was by far the most mentally and physically and emotionally taxing part of the shoot. We had a lot of hard shots and scenes to pull off leading up to that, but there was something about having to live in the Venetian for 2 weeks. I mean, I went outside maybe like 3 times in 2 weeks because it was like 120 degrees outside. So we're basically living indoors. You know, it smells like smoke. You know, you're just artificial light everywhere. The food, you have to eat like random food that's there.
You're not supposed to be in Las Vegas for more than like 3 days, I think. I think that's the end of it.
It was awful. It was honestly awful. And I'm not a gambler. I don't like get off on that kind of stuff. So for me, it was really not very, it didn't get my creative juices flowing. Fortunately, by then we knew what we were doing. The scripts were fun. We had everyone there. Like we were at the end of a shoot. So we were able to enjoy it, but it was really tough. And yeah, we couldn't lock down a lot of the location. The Venetian actually like basically gave us the location for free. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but, it was great publicity for them, but they're like, you can't shut anything down. Like we were able to like use spaces, like the party suite we obviously had control of, but when we were on the casino floor, anywhere outside of the casino, we couldn't even really like tell people to move. We were able to rent a table for one of the scenes, but other than that, yeah, we're working around a live casino and we couldn't do much for lighting. So we really had to just lean into the lighting that was happening there. And we were shooting quick, we had to shoot 2 episodes in basically like 6 days. So it was a lot to pull off. And by then, fortunately, my crew was really dialed in and knew what we were doing. The cast was really dialed in, and we just rocked it.
Did you do the party scene in an actual Las Vegas hotel, or did you build it?
Yeah. No, we did that in one of the Venetian suites, which we had to, shoot during the day in tent, and it was a huge job for my crew because it was tenting something that was, however many floors up. So it was a huge rig for them. And then trying to, again, figure out how to light a space like that 360 degrees that we hadn't built. So we were finding ways to, hide lights or sneak lights behind soffits, things like that. So it was complicated. And we were also like kind of just scouting it as we went. So we were figuring it out on the go. It was wild. I
want to talk just about kind of like your career, maybe your philosophies about filmmaking. As we round out our conversation here, like you get on a show like this, it's extremely successful. It's only going to lead to even better, more interesting things for you. Like, what do you think you learned from this, and how can you sort of apply this moving forward?
I think for me, the more I do this, the more I learn that what's important is, the 2 most important things are the people behind it and the material that we're working with. And then having an amazing crew. And I kind of had the trifecta there of really great directors, really great scripts, and a really supportive, talented crew that I know well. And my career is basically just trying to get more of those types of projects. And I think that this show really shows how difficult it is to make something good. And it's incredible how mediocre a lot of stuff that gets made is out there. And a lot of it is because decisions are made in a democracy when art kind of is not a democracy. And what I've learned is that it takes really strong leaders making really strong and bold choices and taking risks to do something interesting. So for me, it's that mix of finding someone who's really confident, who has really strong ideas, but is also open to collaboration and wants to take risks. And I think that that's actually kind of a difficult thing to find. And so I'm just constantly seeking that out. And it really could take on so many different forms. The last 2 movies I've done are much smaller movies that are relationship drama comedies, and that are very different than what we did in the studio, but they're with directors who were wanting to take risks, wanting to try something different, wanting to make bold choices with the camera and with the performance and with really good material. So for me, it's just about finding that that combination, and a lot of it is just going with your gut, and then sometimes it's just about stepping into the void and taking the risk and not knowing what's going to happen. And I think that's a big part of it, is just accepting that you may have no idea how a project's going to turn out, but there are pieces there that excite you and are going to push you to do something interesting.
How do you stay inspired? When you're in the thick of it, you're weeks into a project like this, you haven't been home in a long time, there's got to be a drain that sets in. How do you keep yourself, fresh every day and inspired every day to make great work?
Some days are easier than others. I think big part of it is like being close with the crew and with the actors and with the directors and just everyone on set. I think that's one thing I've learned. I used to take myself very seriously and work in this sort of like cone of spiritual silence where I was kind of my own person on set, and a lot of that came from, I think a lot of DPs can relate to the fact that we're always traveling, we're always working with new people, and so after a certain point it can be easy to just shut the world out and be like, I'm just gonna like take care of myself and just try to bring the best every day and just sort of close myself off to the world. And I think I learned very quickly that doesn't work, and so for me it's just about embracing each crew as a family and being excited to see the people and engaging with them and, being friends with them. I think that's a big part of it. When you can go to work and see people that you love to work with and love to see, that makes it a lot easier. And then I think other than that, it's just like I try to exercise and not eat terribly and try to distract myself when I'm not on set with things that are not film related. And that's part of why I don't live in a production hub. I live in Oregon, and that really inspires me. It inspires me to come home and be completely outside of the industry and see all my friends who have nothing to do with the film industry, spend a lot of time in nature, and it gets me excited to go back when I do go back.
Is that where you're from, Oregon?
I'm from a small town called Corvallis in Oregon. I now live in Portland. So
you basically stayed in your home state through your entire career. Like that's...
I didn't. So I went to school in New York. I went to NYU. I was in New York for about 11 years, and I kind of told myself I was just going to grind and cut my teeth and kind of ingratiate myself in the industry enough that people knew who I was so that I didn't have to live there.
And then get out.
No, that was literally my goal. I was like, I'm going to stay here until it doesn't matter where I live. And that's what I did. And, it's hard. It is hard not living in LA or New York. I think there are times where it weighs on my family to have to pick up and go to LA for work when we could be living there. But we really love Oregon, and I think a big part of it for me is having like a strong sense of identity of who I am and what I love and what I care about. And I think that is what keeps me inspired. And I for me personally, and I don't think it's the same for everyone, kind of like staying outside of the industry and having other interests is really important to me in my identity. And it makes me feel like I have a unique point of view. And some people could say that's bullshit, but that's just how I feel. And like, I think everyone's different. I think some people I sometimes wish I was the film nerd who wanted to live in Hollywood and go to movies every night and just be around film people. And I think that's really special and really cool. It's just not interesting to me. And like, I like going out and not hearing people chattering about the industry. I really enjoy being outside of it and then kind of dipping into it in different points in my life.
Well, one of our absolute favorite listeners of the Go Creator Show, Fabricio Diaz, he gave us a bunch of questions, and we covered a lot of them. So this is a terrible segue, but I'm actually curious of this too. How does the camera not show up in the windows of the main set? That's what he wants to know, and I think we can round out our conversation.
That's a really good question, and it's yes. Really. Honestly, one of my biggest fears in my career is just seeing the camera, and it was really hard in this. So on the main set build, like the office that we built, I had Julie put gimbals in all the windows. So basically, when a window's mounted, it's not mounted to the frame; it's mounted on a rod in the top and bottom, so the mirror can kind of swivel in different directions. So if we pan over and we see ourselves in a window, we're like, okay, just tweak that window a few degrees to the right, and then it'll cast a different reflection. So that was smart. A big solve there. And then other times it was about the grips carrying a black flag behind camera. So a lot of times when we see a camera as like a silhouette, like we'll have our backs to a window and we're shooting into glass. So you end up seeing the silhouette of the camera operator. So we'd have a grip standing behind the camera operator with a black flag. So instead of seeing his silhouette, you just see black. And then beyond that, those were honestly the two biggest solves. And then sometimes we would do a shot and be like, there's no way we're going to get rid of that reflection. So we would either change the blocking, change the shot slightly. There were only maybe I feel like there were only one or two times where we maybe painted it out in post. It's really difficult to paint out reflections because you have to completely rebuild the reflection, and there's just too much going on in this show. I really didn't, the VFX team did an incredible job and did a lot of work, but a lot of that was creating stuff, and I really didn't want them to be like cleaning up our mess the entire show. I think that was really important to me because I knew that there was a very strict budget for what they were doing for post, and I wanted it to be additive and not just like cleanup. I find cleanup stuff really boring, so I really try to like get as much in camera as possible.
The show is so good. I'm sure everybody listening has seen it, but if you haven't, it's called The Studio. It's on Apple TV Plus. All the episodes of season 1 are available now, and it really is just such a masterpiece and such a master class in the best way to use Oners. Like it's so good. You really truly forget that you're watching a Oner when you see these episodes. It just feels so full, and the coverage seems so robust that nothing is lacking, and it is just 100% from start to finish. You just nailed it. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Yeah, it took a village, but we're really proud of it. Thank you.